Our next speaker is Margaret Lisowiec. Is that it? There it is.
Yes.
It was a software engineer for Google. I leave you the stage, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for hosting me here. It's a pleasure to introduce you to instant apps. I'll reintroduce myself. So I'm Margaret. I am a tech lead manager at Google, and I was with my team responsible for launching Google Trips app in 2016. I don't know, anybody using Google Trips app? Yeah, in 2017, we launched an instant version of it. Why? I'll hope that I'll explain in the following 30 minutes. So instant app was this was the first Google instant app publicly available. So I was working closely with people who are actually putting infrastructure together. So I went through all pain of being the first one in market, in a sense. But it was actually a very good exercise, and I hope that maybe now that it's becoming easier, some of you will try it. Before I start, I would like to know how many of you actually used instant apps or are familiar with the concept? Right? How many of you know about the app bundles? Okay, so quite a few. Okay, so let's start. So you may think that Google Teams have advantage of acquiring users because we are in Google. Well, that's not exactly how it works, right? So we as a developers team would need to really work hard to acquire users because Play Store rules are the same for everybody, including our internal teams. So we need to fight for the users with the quality of the app, and one of the aspects of the quality is actually how big is the app, the APK size. Because it has, we basically want to have high install rate and low uninstall rate, right? So this is the main challenge. Google Trips is the app that people don't use every day. They use it only when they travel, and most people travel really once or twice a year. That's what our stats show. So it's hard to get them into habit of using it every day. And if people don't use it every day, and they have this, big app that is on their phone, what will happen? Well, they will try to uninstall it, right? So, and the next time they go on a trip, they may remember or not remember to install it again. But again, you have to go through the hurdle of installing it. And why it's so difficult to get people to install it? So I don't know how many of you probably have more modern phones, so I'm not sure if you actually ran into the situation. Anybody here? Right, so some people, even with the really powerful phones, see that, okay, their device is just running out of space, right? So you get multiple notifications that you cannot really install the big app, or it's prompting you to uninstall, free up space. And what we know that one in the fifth uninstall is caused actually by the low space on the device. And even in US and UK, a lot of people have less, every fifth phone has less than 1 gigabyte of storage. So it's not just the emerging markets that have this problem, but a lot of developed countries, people are just having everything on their phones. So it's not just the apps that are, your app may be small, but you're still fighting with a lot of large apps for the space on the phone. And if your app is not used every day, then it's a candidate for being uninstalled. Actually, Google developed an app called Files Go, which is, I think, launched in India. And because in India, people have basically, the phone is their the main computer, right? And they don't have a lot of space on their phones. And there is this app which is trying to remind them, okay, you can get rid of these files, or you can archive these files, or you can get rid of these apps. So there's many apps like that who are trying to maintain, the storage on your phone. And well, if you have an app which is not used every day, then it's likely to be uninstalled. So if your app needs to be installed multiple times, or even like the first time, what is really the problem? I mean, install success decreases as the apps gets bigger. So this kind of shows you like the graph that we shared, I think, at Google I/O with a lot of developers. Like it's basically like 100 megabyte APK will install will have like 30% less success than like 10 megabyte APK. You think, okay, if we know that, why is it that the apps are getting bigger, right? So since 2012, when we launched the precursor of app.They, which was the marketplace for the apps, at that time, the apps were around like 6-7 megabytes, and today they got like 5 times larger. So if people know that the larger apps are like caused to be problem with the installation, why is this really happening? Why should you care about the size? I mean, like it's lost installs, right? Because if your install doesn't run to the end, then people are less likely to retry it. But also you will get a lot of uninstalls because people will try to install different apps and they will uninstall your app. So why the apps are getting bigger? So maybe some people from the audience who developed apps, did you have some experience with this problem that, you know, like your app is getting bigger? Did you maybe somebody could tell me what was the reason why the apps are getting bigger? Maybe somebody can guess. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So like the libraries are getting richer and bigger. I don't know if anybody knows the library that is shrinking over time, but mostly you just by having these dependencies, your apps get bigger. And okay, of course you have, yes? Yes. So the other is like the better images, right? So you're trying to boost your you know, like how beautiful your app is by putting like more rich imagery, and of course that costs the size of the app. People are also trying to take advantage of new features, like, you know, like maybe your app wants to take a photo and it needs to link with some sharing library, or it needs to support, for example, new languages. If you translate strings and you put them in your APK, that also takes size, right? I mean, it takes space. So like imagine you just went through internationalization and suddenly your app is like 20% bigger. Well, that's the reason. If you start, and another reason which, you know, like you mentioned is there's so many different Android devices, right? Different screen densities. If you want to support all of them, you usually, what you end up doing is you load your resources into like 6 different DPIs, right? Like and if you package this all in one APK, then suddenly you have a bloat, right? So it's really, really easy to get into the situation where, you know, like even small features, but you just support more devices or more languages and your app is getting bigger. Actually, you know, like a specific example from our app, when we started supporting multiple densities, our app got about 20% bigger just from the resources that we were linking for different densities. So let's recap what we talked about. So increasing the size of your app has all these potential downsides, right? Like lower conversion rates from the start, like some people will just not install it. The downloads are slower, and you may not think about it here, when you are downloading the app. But a lot of people who are on a really slow network, when they start downloading the app, they put the phone in their pocket, and the network is really, really slow. And it's also eating their battery, right? And not everywhere in the world you are in the comfortable situation where you can recharge your phone. So that also is contributing to some lost conversions. And also higher uninstalls, because your app may be, people may think that your big app is just taking their space. And you also have the lower update rates. And I'll come back to this lower update rates, because it is something which is like really relevant to the instant app case. But for now, let's skip it. And well, what can we do? I mean, new features, diverse ecosystem, this is not gonna really change. So what we can expect, the apps will get bigger and bigger. So is there a hope? So there is a hope. So Google, people who work on Android ecosystem, like Play Store people and people who work on building Android Studio, they thought about this for a while. And they came up with this concept, app bundles. And they are trying to basically solve a lot of these problems for you, for developers. I encourage you to actually go check it out. Today we'll focus only on the first element of this. This is called instant trials, because instant apps are now fully integrated with app bundles. And that's what I'll talk about in more details. But I would like to mention that this is also helping you to get your APKs smaller. So instant bundles basically breaking up, I mean, usually when you're trying to make your APK smaller, what you ended up doing is you ended up uploading multiple APKs to Play Store, and you said, okay, this is for given density, and then the device asks Play Store, give me for this density, and you basically get like only resources for a given density. But this is really painful, right? Because if you do the split per architecture, per density, I think we ended up with something like 60 binaries uploaded to the Play Store. Of course, you can automate it, but it's really a pain, right? So with the app bundles, you don't need to worry about this anymore. You can split your artifacts. It's called artifacts. You upload your artifacts in bundles. So your code, your configuration per language, per architecture, and per density. And Play Store will use the new technology to basically, when the user asks for installation, they will put together the bundle for this particular phone. And you don't need to do this bundling, pre-bundling upfront before when you are doing the development. They also introduced dynamic features, which is also very close concept to instant apps. Imagine that your app is, like has some feature which is only used by a very small percentage of users. You still don't want to, like these are powerful users and you don't want to drop this functionality. Well, what you could do, you could actually split it into separate module and let this module be downloaded on demand, only for the users who really need it. And that comes also with resources. And well, the last is, of course, I mean, the artifact of the fact that we have a smaller bundles is that our updates are also faster, and we also all know that it's really important to keep people on the latest version, so we don't need to maintain like the server for the backward compatibility, etc. So Google Play Instant. The technology is available on like 1.3 billion devices. Why it's also important? It lets users try your app before they install it. So if you are trying to solve the problem of uninstalls, like a lot of people will try your app and say, okay, this is not really for me, and then uninstall it. That's kind of frustrating, right? Because you fight really for the users and you want them to keep your app. But it's not really a good way to try it if you just to install it and then uninstall it. So this try now button, which is available for Play Store, if you have an Android phone, right now and you don't have Google Trips installed, you can actually try search Play Store now for Google Trips. And on this page, you should be able to see like the try now button. So I encourage you to try. I'll show you a little demo a bit later. And right now, I mean, before there was a limitation that the instant apps had to be like associated with certain URLs. Now for try now button, this limitation was like removed, so you don't really need to have URL for your basic app, but you can still take advantage of it. So yes, it may be harder. Like your install rate will go down if people try it and don't like it, but for the users it's really a good thing, right? Because they don't need to go through the frustration of downloading and undownloading, and especially if they need to use the data plan, which is very precious. I didn't mention, but like in India and Indonesia, actually less than 50% of people have Wi-Fi connections. So some of them have free mobile plans, but some of them need to really pay for it. So imagine for them the cost of just trying an app, right? It's really a huge cost. With the instant app, because it's a smaller app, they pay less of the price. They pay only like 10 megabytes, up to 10 megabytes. Your app doesn't need to be that big to try it out. Other than Try Now, there is also, you can launch Instant App through the Try Now button, but you can also try it through the URL-based intents. This is something which can actually link deeper into your app, not on the front page. And maybe with this point, I could try to run the demo. So see if we can. Maybe the first demo that I would like to try. So my phone somehow is stuck in this position. That's okay. So this is, anyway, I should get it into the. It's somehow stuck in the landscape mode, but that's okay. So this is our instant app. So we are basically showing like the preview, what you can do. So let's click on, for example, London. And you can browse some functionality, and I'll click on things to do, and you can see, okay, do I like this app or do I don't like this app? And okay, at this point we prompt for the install, so you can like say, okay, I really like it, I want to install it, and you can proceed, right? The other alternative of doing it is, so let me go to the barcode scanner. And again, if you have some barcode scanner, you can scan this QR code. Again, this is Zurich. So this link is actually a direct link to preview not like generic destinations in Trips app, but specifically it's encoded. Zurich is encoded in the URL, and you can again do the same. Like you can see, like, okay, what can I see in Zurich? And yeah. Okay, so that's it for the demo. I guess we can return to our presentation. So with the app bundle, what I want to mention is that building instant app is much easier. One of the reasons is that it's fully integrated with the Android Studio 3.2, and with Android Studio 3.3, it's beta. You have even more features. There was increased allowance for building instant apps, so now it's 10 megabytes. It used to be 4 megabytes. And it's more gracefully handles sandbox restrictions. Not everything you can do in instant app. For example, native development kit is not available, and there are some limitations on some APIs. But overall, it's actually quite powerful, and you can build the native experience without forcing users to install your app. So now I'll talk a little bit about our experience, how we selected features to be available in instant app. And that's probably the hardest problem that you need to answer yourself. Like, how do you modularize your app in such a way that you offer something in instant experience or in this dynamically loaded modules without really sacrificing too much? One thing that you should not do is create instant app purely as an advertisement for forcing people to install it, right? So like there are some guidelines, like your install prompt should not be available, like should not be really in the way of the user trying it. So the way we decided to split it is we said, okay, everything which is like read-only, which can be also for not signed-in users, we will allow in our instant app. Everything which requires user to log in or like have email using Gmail, we will prompt for the installation. So in our instant app, like you can preview things to do, you can see maps, you can see some information about from the guides, but you cannot really, for example, modify reservations that were passed. You cannot really access even reservations because that proved to be more technical difficult with the account selection and APIs that were available at that time. So this is like the flow. We basically, the Trips app is really powerful for if you want to take your guide and works offline. But of course, like if you are instant, you are not offline. So we replaced this button of downloading destination with basically prompt of the prompting user to install the app. And now I want to also think about like, do you really require users to install your app? Because if you have such a great functionality in your instant, maybe you don't need to really work that hard to force everybody to convert, right? If you offer quite a lot of functionality in an instant, it becomes more like, web app, right? Because the difference between you doing like the native app and forcing user to install or doing like the web app is being less prominent, right? And you actually have users already through the instant experience. You don't really need to force them to install app, and if they only want to use it like the small fraction of it, right? So yeah, so that's kind of for me like reminds me a little bit like the history of the early PCs, like when people like before the web, right? people were installing applications on their PCs and they were like uninstalling because they were running out of space. And then, okay, applications moved to the web and you were still like downloading apps on your PC and installing it. But then, okay, more and more games you played just online. There was like Flash games, and there were games like in the JavaScript. And so like this became like less and less relevant for the users to install a piece of software on their computer. And within Internet App, I think this is quite similar. What's happening in the mobile world, that actually it's not that important that people install it, because you can provide very beautiful native experience of the native app through the instant without forcing people to install it. So that's, I think we're running out of time. I just want to thank you also, my colleagues who were created this, a lot of this content was created for the Playtime conference that was in Berlin, I think 2 days ago, and in San Francisco yesterday. So this is really fresh content. They talked more in depth about the app bundles, not just instant apps. With this, I think I can open for questions, or I can do more demos. Thank you.
You actually have a lot of time left, to be honest. You have like 14 minutes. Is there any questions?
Yes. For example, ads. We always use a library to display ads, so that wouldn't be possible in an instant app, right? Or is there a way to do that anyways?
I mean, playing ads, I mean, you don't have this restriction. I mean, if you want to place ads in your instant app, of course you can. I think you need to be a little bit careful, because if your purpose is to use instant app to like lure people to install it, then you need to think, okay, are these people really liking ads or not, right? So, and this is a question like you need to actually answer from the business perspective. It might be good, to get people to know that if your app is really playing ads, then they will also see them in the instant. On the other hand, this could be something which is, a bit hard. So one thing that maybe I'll share experience from our app. Our app uses location quite intensively, because it can offer you suggestion what you see in the city based on your location. But we decided not to ask for permissions for location in the instant app in the first screen, because a lot of people okay, you open it, you want to try it, and first thing you see is, oh, it's asking me for permissions, right? So we decided, okay, let's live without the location permission for a while, and then, okay, we'll ask it later. We also ask it in the instant app context, but a little bit later. And I think the same may be true for playing ads.
How will the app developers see Google Play Instant when actually it might have a negative impact on the number of installations?
Why it would have the negative impact?
Because if people try it for a bit but do not install it, it doesn't click on the number of installations. It just, the user passes by to the next app. So the developer doesn't click numbers, installation numbers.
So I think this is really it depends really how you play the game of encouraging people to install it within your instant app, right? So we try, in our app, we try to encourage people to install it. We say, okay, we have this functionality, but if you try to access it, you need to install it. And actually installation through the instant might be a little bit nicer, because you don't really have this big screen Play Store. You can actually have a dialogue which is smaller, so people don't feel like this is, okay, you're thrown out of the context. But like for you, it's actually a question like, what is really the purpose of your app? I mean, are you happy with the fact that they use only instant and without installing it? Maybe if they will be coming back and back, then maybe you could also say, okay, you are using the instant app, and now maybe it would be better if you install it. I think you have more control over it than if you don't offer this. If you don't offer a preview. So from our stats, we see that like for the travel app, how many people uninstall it. Sometimes the uninstall rate was like really high, like 40% people who installed it uninstalled it. With the instant preview, we see that upwards of 75% people keep it. So I think that looking at the stats would answer your question for your particular app.
I need to press something. So you are saying that one of the benefits is that the app doesn't need to be downloaded. How does it work when I try the app and then I return, I don't know, after 1 week and I want to try it again? Does it need to be downloaded again to my phone, or is it still stored somewhere?
Yeah, so there is some caching going on. So like if you try it again, it will most likely be cached. But this is like with all properties of cache. If the device is running low on the storage, then the app will be removed. And the same for your instant app. You are allowed to do some persistent storage on the device using SQL. There are some limitations with using content providers, but you can use shared preferences. So you can actually remember the history of the users of using your instant app.
First of all, great talk, Margaret. Seems like it's a very neat idea to show off. What I understand from it is it's like a teaser of the MVP feature set to lure people in to use it. One of your slides mentioned how having multiple updates affects a lot of users. I want to get your opinion on using React Native for building mobile apps.
So I don't really have a strong opinion on that because I haven't done it. So like I try not to go with that. But I mean, coming back to your comment about this being a teaser, there's one more. Could be one more reason why you would want to have an instant app. Let's say if it's not the case for our app, but let's say if you have a website and the website, like you have the scheme of URLs and you let's say you focus on the desktop web, but you don't want to do the mobile web and the app and everything. You can actually delegate a lot of the mobile web functionality be handled by the app. And maybe I will show you like a little demo again. For some reason, my phone wants to stay in the landscape mode. I don't really know why. So I'll show you an example of some other app, which, because we don't have web, we don't win the web search results. But let's say if the web search can detect that you have instant app that can handle given URL, it actually shows up in the search results. So you can install app from here, or you can try it. That should load the instant. Okay. Well, like this is the example of the BuzzFeed instant app, right? So that's another reason why you may want to use it. I mean, it's not directly answering your question, but. Yeah.
So after experience this try now, how big must be the bundle? So the code and everything, how big should be in order to be enough fast to be a try now and not to be an install?
Sorry?
So the size of the, at the end you have to deliver a bundle, really? So
Okay.
it has a side, you have to download it.
Yes.
There is no install, but anyway you have to download it. So which will be the size of the bundle to be a try now and not to be an install, in your opinion?
Okay, I get it. So the platform team increased actually allowance. It used to be 4 megabytes of the compressed APK after pro-guarding and everything, but they increased it to 10 megabytes. However, from my experience is, like if you want to have a crisp experience, I would try to stay under 3 megabytes. And actually, with the Google Trips app, which I showed you, we managed to get it to around like 2 megabytes. And maybe I could share like few tips with you. So you saw that. Actually, maybe I'll show you the little tools that you can use. So this is Android Studio, and Android Studio has this tool like Analyze APK, right? So this is the APK that it's one of our instant APKs. And one of the things that you notice here is that, okay, it has classes. Okay, your code is your code. You cannot really remove it. But resources actually are eating quite a lot of space. And what we ended up saying, okay, do we really need to have all images bundled in our APK? And what we did, we actually put a lot of images like the styles, the pictures, illustrations in our app. We put them on the static web. So we are downloading them on demand. It's unlikely our installed app, which has everything in the bundle because it should work offline. This one we decided, okay, let's put it out, and because you are downloading the app, but then you can download images. And if there are like 30, 50K images, they will download very quickly in the app. The user will not notice, but this is not part of your initial start. Like when you click the button to preview it, you don't notice it, right? So I think you can play techniques like that to get it really under, like you can see here, it's 2 megabytes. Download size is 2 megabytes. Actually, there are two different sizes, right? There's our APK size and there's also compressed size, which this one is trying to predict. And so it's actually not that hard. The other thing that you may also try, what we did, we used to link Maps SDK in our app because we wanted to have some features which are not available in the Play Services Maps SDK. But for the instant, we actually changed that. It was a little bit hard because we had to have different packages, but we used the wrappers, and because we used the Dagger as an injection, we said, okay, there are two implementations, one for instant and one for the installed app, and they actually have that completely different implementation. It was a little bit of pain, but the gain were huge, right? I mean, we basically removed 1 point something megabyte library from our binary, which was like a huge savings. The same idea also for support library. We didn't do that. I mean, we still use support library in our instant because, okay, we got to 2 megabytes and we said, okay, that's fine. Like a lot of web pages have 2 megabytes, so like why bother, right? So I mean, we were quite happy, and the experience that I showed you, we think it's decent, right?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your interaction. Thank you, Margaret, for your talk. We can applaud her one more time.
Thank you very much.
This is your gift.
Oh.